Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us today for what's new in TR 398, brought to you by the University of New Hampshire Interoperability Laboratory. My name is Lincoln Lavoie. I am the UNH Iowa Principal Engineer. I've been with the lab for nearly 25 years, which is starting to be painful to say that, but that's what happens in life. As well as I am currently the elected technical chair for the Broadband Forum. And joining me today is Nathan Miner, who I will allow to introduce himself.
Hey everybody. Yeah, thanks, Lincoln. Yeah, I've been here at the lab for 9 years now. My goodness, my time's getting up there too. Um, I'm currently a technical manager for the broadband team. In my time here, I've worked on developing tests in our test automation, Test Sentinel. I've worked in the DSL group, GFast, and most recently wireless as well.
Great, thanks, Nate. So Nate will be talking to us in a few minutes about the lab setup and our software and how we ensure repeatability. So before we dive into what's new in TR 398, I thought it would be great to kind of go through a little bit of history and how we got where we are today, give a little bit of background and some insight into the previous versions of the test plan and kind of what was a lot of the motivation for before that. So for those that have been following this work along the way, issue one actually got published first in 2019. That was the industry's first agreed upon performance test plan for Wi-Fi. Obviously, Wi-Fi testing has existed for a long while, but not as focused on measuring the performance of the systems. And that work was started in the Broadband Forum as the service providers essentially approached the forum saying that they were facing an increasing challenge with Wi-Fi. And if you need any understanding of that, think about any time you've gone to your friend's house or visited a friend or family. You don't ask, hey, do you have internet? You ask, hey, do you have Wi-Fi and can I get the password? Right. And so, Wi-Fi has become synonymous with internet access, and the quality of that connection has become synonymous with the quality of the internet connection from the service provider. And so service providers are keen to ensure that the best possible customer experience is available to their subscribers. And that really drove the first motivation for getting this off the ground way back when in 2019. Following on from issue one, work started on issue two pretty much immediately. As you can see, issue one kind of started with the basics. It built on Wi-Fi 4 and 5. Issue two immediately started adding Wi-Fi 6 support for 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But also it began to develop the BBF carrier grade Wi-Fi program. And that will be something we'll talk about in a second about what that means. But the other important piece to realize in all of this development is all along the way, TR 398 has always focused on testing actual deployment scenarios. So the testing that is developed in 398 doesn't necessarily flex like, hey, we're going to test 8 spatial streams at hundreds of megahertz wide channels, because that's not the typical subscriber experience when they're connecting to the Wi-Fi system with, say, a mobile device, a tablet, or a laptop within their residence, or even within a business, right? So like you're not actually seeing that type of connectivity, and that's the type of connectivity that the test plan focuses on overall to ensure that quality. And then lastly, obviously, today we're talking about issue three, which one of the big things that adds is obviously Wi-Fi 6E. But I'm not going to spoil the entire rest of our webinar by diving into everything that's covered inside 6E right this minute. So before we actually dive into what's inside the test plan, we wanted to actually reach out to the group and just see what everybody has faced in their current deployment scenarios. All of this polling is going to be anonymous, and we'll share the results with you all. But if you want to go ahead and just take a second, fill out some of the issues that you've seen, we'll take a look at that and kind of see what the groups have experienced. Also, this is a great time to mention our Q&A will follow up with the presentation here, and we can revisit any of these results as well. To ask a question, go ahead and queue that up in the Zoom webinar Q&A button. And from there, we'll circle back around to those at the end of the results. And as I mentioned, we can revisit any of the polling question results as well at that time. So we'll give this probably another 20, 30 seconds or so. This is where got to do the bit of song and dance while you guys all have a chance to click the buttons. But thank you to those who have already kind of highlighted some of the issues. And I am now realizing this changed and launched the wrong question for us.
Yeah, I just realized that
So
too.
we're going to give that a half second to finish. Apologies for that. And that one. And I'm going to actually launch the real poll for what you've seen for deployment issues. And apologies for that again. That will actually allow us to capture what things you've seen in your deployment. Sorry about that all. Now I definitely need to do a quick song and dance to entertain everybody while they're clicking these in. We'll give it another 15 seconds or so. Oh, I think we're still seeing a couple of changes here. We'll give it a minute. All right, that's looking pretty solidified. And click share results. I'll move that over just in case anybody didn't see it. Everyone should be seeing it. It seems like we have a pretty good solid winner of throughput issues, unsurprisingly being one of the leading contenders here, followed by range and directional issues and client roaming between mesh or multi-APs. On the positive note, that actually does align quite well with what is in TR398 in terms of performance testing and metrics. So we'll dive into those a little bit more. I'm glad to see that otherwise there's not as many other issues reported or anything for the kind of fill in the blank. So that seems like we're at least on the right direction for the performance testing overall. And as I mentioned, lastly, we can revisit any of these during the Q&A session. So if this is prompting a question or something you want to discuss a little bit at the end of this, we'll go ahead and reach back to that in a little bit. But on to carrier grade Wi-Fi and the overall program. So the outcome of all of this testing that's being done within the broadband forum really is driving this carrier grade Wi-Fi program, which is the formal outcome for devices that are completing the performance testing by successfully testing all of the mandatory test cases at an approved laboratory. Those devices are then eligible to be listed actually on the Broadband Forum's public website. That website captures the device under test, the information about its software and firmware, the date that it was tested, the applicable test plan version. So now that we have issue 3 out and published, you can see a difference between issue 2 and 3 devices as they start to appear on the list, as well as any optional features that may be supported by the device. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means as we come along, but there is the ability for some test cases to be conditional upon the features that are supported in a device. So, a good example is not all devices would support 6 gigahertz, but do obviously probably support Wi-Fi 6 or 802.11ax. And so you can obviously identify the difference and clearly identify the differences between those devices as they were tested on the Wi-Fi. So from that perspective, let's go ahead and take a quick look at like what would appear on the Broadband Forum's website. So just everything is in alphabetical order there. So company listings, just kind of giving an idea of what that website looks like. But you can see You have the Wi-Fi capabilities, so you know the spectrum and the bands. You have the optional features that were tested and capabilities, as well as test IDs and dates that were tested and the full bit of information for software and stuff like that. So what is intended is operators are able to use this information to help make selections for their network or upgrades onto their network as a resource as they're planning their deployments. But everybody's really here today to hear about what we're doing within issue 3 and what is new to the table. So as mentioned previously, probably the most obvious piece is the Wi-Fi 6E performance. So adding 6 gigahertz testing into the mix. This actually adds a number of new test cases and as well as updates to a lot of the existing test cases where we just simply added the required configuration scenarios as well as the performance metrics for something like the range versus throughput, which is pretty straightforward testing for 6E. Other kind of more nuanced additions were where we now have a multi-band test case or a multi-band throughput case, which actually measures performance of when you're running all 3 bands in parallel, so 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz simultaneously. So obviously there's some nuanced details that come into there as you're adding just the 6 gigahertz of the 6E into it. Also brand new to issue 3 is a set of test cases focused on some additional aspects of performance. So historically, TR398 was very focused on throughput in terms of bits per second. But now, as you know, we're continuing to see performance overall in the network mean more than just your raw throughput. Latency and jitter and some of those other quality of service parameters are also becoming increasingly important. And so what the issue 3 now adds in a whole new set of sections for testing that latency as a mandatory test case, as well as QoS through the WMM configurations as an optional test case at this point. So that would again be one of those optional features that can be tested and then listed as a capability in the device list. Overall, again, this is for the operators to ensure that the best quality of experience is available for those at home so that something like this Zoom session doesn't turn into a walkie-talkie session. And then lastly, on this slide, we have mesh and Wi-Fi extender testing. So in issue 2, you may have noticed that these test cases were part of an informative annex. That annex allowed us to start to frame up what the test cases were going to look like as for further study. But those have now been actually pulled forward into the main body of the document, as well as setting mandatory performance requirements for those 2 scenarios. And this is one area where I think that we'll see overall that we're just starting to scratch the surface on mesh or multi-AP deployments and performance testing in those scenarios. But wait, there's more. Yes, still more stuff. There's another whole new section that was added to issue 3 as well. These are really examining the accuracy of parameters that are measured by the AP or the device under test, such as the observed channel noise, the RCPI, and the accuracy of those parameters is growing concern for the operators who are looking to take that information through bulk data collection or other means of consuming it and push that into systems like AI and ML-enabled systems, and then performing closed-loop automation for Wi-Fi management across their subscribers. Especially important in places like multi-tenant buildings where you have APs from other folks that may be seeing and contributing to that channel noise, or just in a multi-AP system where you're optimizing inside the residence. Doing that through AI and ML is the way that operators are looking in the future. And then lastly, issue 3 also continues the approach of defining some test cases as for further study. This is the case with the multicast performance testing. So that's looking at the structure of how we would test the multicast over the wireless to multiple stations at the same time. Right now, that is in the informative annex, and it has some structure allowing for stations at various distances from the AP or attenuations, and then making sure that you're meeting a minimum quality of experience in terms of no drop packets or a minimum number of drop packets for each of those connections down to the various stations for that. So with that, that really does sum up kind of at the high level all of the new additions that we have seen added into issue 3, which was just published here a few weeks ago. And I'll turn it over to Nate, our technical manager, who's going to talk a bit more about TR398 in the lab, our test bed, and how we achieve the repeatable results.
Oh, thanks, Lincoln. Before I get right into about how we do the testing here at UNH, I wanted to mention what we already all kind of know. Trying to test those wireless devices in open air is packed with obstacles and challenges. It's become nearly impossible to have an isolated environment for wireless testing, especially if you're in like an office space. There's too much going on in that area. So to overcome these obstacles, you're going to need some equipment. Isolation chambers. As I mentioned, that open air, there's just too many unknowns. Everybody with their phones or other wireless devices, random APs in the environment. Um, but along with the challenge of isolation, there are other factors for testing. You're going to want to test or be able to simulate distance, rotation. You're going to want to have a controlled, dense network of wireless stations, and then keeping all these variables so that you can have them repeated. So how do we at UNH overcome these challenges? For our 398 testing, we work closely with Octoscope. Our testing setup consists of 3 isolation chambers, and they're all connected to one another through attenuators. That's to simulate that distance I was talking about. For testing devices' spatial consistency, the rotation, we use directional antennas and a turntable that's fitted in the bottom of the chamber so that your access point can be put on that turntable. We'll be able to tell at a certain rotation how well the signal is doing. In each of those chambers, we also have PALs, or endpoint emulators. These are each capable of simulating up to 32 stations. This gives us that high density situation that I mentioned. All of these components combined together give us an environment to produce those repeatable results and ensure that high quality for the BBF 398 grade Wi-Fi device once it's been tested. We go on to the next slide real quick, Lincoln. Yeah. So we've kind of covered that physical environment that we have. But that's not all there is to testing. We have the testing procedures, data collection, and documentation. So here at UNH, I mentioned at the beginning that I've worked on our automation. We have our automation test sentinel. It's been carefully tested and tried, and our testing software for 398 has been continuously being developed since issue 1. This automation removes that human error from the testing procedure. The same action will be taken for every single test run. This ensures that the test stays consistent. Data collection. We track everything for every test run. We track the test equipment's firmware, their software versions, all at runtime. All the settings used for the APs, the stations, the attenuators. This helps us pinpoint changes to a device that, caused something that maybe was once working and now is not working. We can tell when a new addition to a device is having a positive impact for the performance. By comparing old test results with new test results over time, it gives you a good picture of how a device's development is coming along. Not only that, you can also get regression testing, so you can make sure any changes you've made are not, impacting the performance in a negative way. We not only keep track of all this data, we also archive the firmwares, the actual devices, and device-specific commands at runtime. So we're able to recreate that exact environment that the test was run at. This is our repeatability, and this saves on time and money when you're trying to debug any problems. We're able to look back and find exactly when something changed. We're able to take fixes in real time and debug and retest quickly to find solutions that will work and solve some of these problems that come up. So this kind of brings me to my last point of the other thing that we bring is our experience. Our test setup is ready to go, but our testers also know this test setup. They also know the test cases for the testing. And they bring this experience to help solve any problems that do arise when running these performance tests. So to sum up the full test environment here at UNH, we have the test equipment. That gives us our consistent physical environment. We have our lab management practices, so our documentation and our data gathering, and our test experience that helps us streamline that testing process, and it gives you fast and repeatable results so you can see what's going on. I'm going to pass it back over to Lincoln. I hope that kind of sums up what we have going on at the lab for you.
Great. Thank you, Nate, for that excellent dive onto how we approach the testing as well as how we achieve the repeatability required for the carrier grade Wi-Fi program. If that sparked any questions you might want to ask Nate as the expert in the testing, go ahead and get those queued in now. Otherwise, I wanted to just take a minute to start thinking about what does the future look like, right? So one of the things that the Broadband Forum has aimed for now with the BBF 398 development is to push towards an annual cycle. So with the release of issue 3 just this past month, issue 4 really does aim for Q1 2025 or about the same time next year. We are also going to make some changes to the development process inside the Broadband Forum, moving towards Markdown instead of Microsoft Word and some other kind of nuanced details. But it's kind of under the hood part of it. More interesting is what are we looking at for adding to 398 issue 4? So some things that are on the table, nothing is finalized yet. Obviously, adding more test cases to cover Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 7. So looking towards things like OFDMA, AFC, etc., more 6 gigahertz test cases. Onto Wi-Fi 7, which has got kind of everybody's interest peaked. Things like MLO, almost definitely 4K QAM, probably most definitely 300 megahertz channels, maybe. The question there again is we're want to keep TR 398 and BBF 398 aimed towards what would be the subscriber's experience, and 300 channels may not be widely deployed or used yet out there, and so it may not make as much sense to focus on that piece of performance testing right away. Another key area that we're always continuing to improve is just the overall design of the test plan, testability, reducing the time. So implementing things like binary search approaches in some places for looking for device performance or seeking out that performance, or the receiver sensitivity test case, for an example. Really just to reduce time, again, increase testability, increase repeatability, overall design. But we want to actually hear from you all as well for what your interest is. So I'm going to relaunch the poll that I messed up at the beginning of this. And we will go ahead and apologies to everyone because that's going to clear out your earlier choices. But we want to hear from you about what the most important pieces are in Wi-Fi 4. And again, everything is anonymous, but this will definitely be some input that I bring to the Broadband Forum as well as the lab team here, just to make sure that we're meeting your all needs as you're looking towards the future. So probably give this another 10 to 20 seconds here as people are responding. And I'll take this moment to mention too, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those in to the Q&A panel as well. Go with about another 15 or so seconds. Again, this is all anonymous, but I think it's very, very helpful to ourselves on the Broadband Forum to know the direction that everybody is leaning towards on their testing needs and desires. All right, we'll go with a last call here. All right, we're going to end that, and I will share the results with everyone. So just to let people see where we at, clear winners here between mesh and AP testing, as well as it looks like the other performance. So things like latency or other KPIs. This is actually a little interesting to me. So I would have expected Wi-Fi 7 specific features to have scored a little bit higher in this. But we never really know what we're going to get with these bits of input, and I think this is definitely aligned in terms of with some of the stuff that we're seeing with the increased views on latency, things like QED within the broadband forum, which is the quality of experience measurements, and some of the ways that those are performed. And then obviously the mesh and multi-AP as those systems continue to roll out everywhere. So thank you everybody for participating in that. Really do appreciate that overall. And again, if you want to ask any other questions about that, we can do that as well. Otherwise, we will launch into the Q&A part of the session. Happy to help answer any questions about how to get involved, either through testing devices in the lab, contributing towards the issue 4 work within the broadband forum. Also just to throw out the note here of the inverted spider AP there on the left isn't required to pass the BBF 398 testing, but it does sure look cool with the logo on top of it. And a call out to Nate. I'll thank him for all the incredible graphics that we used in this presentation, because he hand drew all of these. So talented beyond just our lab staff as well.
Thanks, Lincoln.
All right. So it looks like we've got one question coming in here with carrier CPEs supporting application containers. So I think that would be like lifecycle management from Purple Foundation. Are you able to test how these containerized applications impact the AP performance or the customer QoEs? So that's a great question. That is not something I had actually thought about. It's certainly something that could fall directly into the purview of 398 and the performance testing. I think that what we would look to you all and the industry and the service providers to maybe help define a bit of would be, what is that kind of container application that is the part of the testing? So essentially thinking about how would you load up the CPU on that gateway or CPE device from the container's perspective, right? So that way we kind of have a repeatable metric or a repeatable chunk of the test setup, right? So it's not like, oh, I loaded on container X or container Y. Maybe we would work as the industry to create a container that is the reference test container that just generates a known amount of load on the CPE device from that perspective. But that is definitely a great question and something to consider for issue 4. Especially as we continue to see the lifecycle management stuff grow from within both Purple and the Broadband Forum has the 492 project as well, which is the app-enabled smart gateway. All right, looks like we've got another question coming in here of just how does the IWell collaborate with the Broadband Forum? And so overall, the lab has participated in the Broadband Forum for about 20 plus years. I think my first meeting was in 2003, but I was not the first one to attend or participate in Broadband Forum. Within the context of the Wi-Fi testing and the overall testing programs within the Broadband Forum, all approved labs are expected and required to directly participate in the work areas that are defining the testing being executed in those labs. And so given that, we definitely collaborate in providing input into the test plans. And then another key place that we collaborate is in helping to set the pass-fail metrics for these type of performance tests. And so these type of performance tests, we will usually measure multiple devices provided by other Broadband Forum members, like the vendor communities, to help kind of set an average bar so that we can make sure that the metrics are not exceeding what is actually possible, and they're not based only on purely theoretical. So that's one of the key areas that we definitely collaborate as well beyond just defining the actual test cases themselves or the text in the test plan. Okay, we've got a couple of questions that rolled in. Did I hear mention you can test the effectiveness of QED or QOO on quality of outcome? Yes, there is testing that is defined for QED. It is not part of the TR398 correctly, but there are ways to measure that on essentially a connectivity path or overall. The other place I can steer you to if you want to see some demonstrations of that, as well as there are some broadband forum videos for the demo that we did with the forum for Network X last year. And that also was a demonstration of QED actually running in real time and then helping to make changes to the network based on that. Any test to measure MOS or voice scoring? There are not any tests currently in 398 for that. That may start to push the bounds a little bit. There's been talk about both video as well as voice measurements. The challenge with respect to adding those to Wi-Fi testing is it starts to really include things like the video encoder as well as the encoding mechanisms, and that goes both on voice side as well as video side. So it's not just purely the network connection, it's also how good the device is and processors on the devices and stuff. And so it becomes a little bit harder to point the finger at just the Wi-Fi connectivity or the AP, since like the video renderer and voice rendering system play such an integral role in that. But if anybody has any ideas for how to potentially define test cases that would kind of make the Wi-Fi testing center to that, love to hear those as well. Okay. How do you see the role in the home between multiple APs, wired backhaul, and wireless backhaul? So as of today, TR398, all of the testing for the multi-AP or the repeated Wi-Fi is assuming a wireless backhaul from the repeater or the mesh AP. I think that is something that 398 issue 4 will start to look into in a little bit more detail. So starting to define additional scenarios as we look towards things, because I think one of the key points that people had mentioned before was roaming, or challenges that they had mentioned before was roaming between multiple APs. And as we start to look at like some of those performance test cases, I think it will start to become interesting as you look towards the differences you see in wired backhaul versus wireless backhaul for the deployment scenarios, because operators around the world are going to use both of those scenarios overall. I think we have caught up to all of our questions. Give it another minute or so here, see if anybody has any last minute thoughts. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come in here. So thank you all very much for joining us today. I managed, it looks like, to have the 5G connection and the generator stay running for all of this session. So that is good, given the weather event that we're having here in the Northeast. Thank you again for joining our webinar. We will get this published up as a recording that you can have access to download in the future, share with your colleagues. And if you have any other questions that you wish you had asked at the end, please do feel free to reach out to Nate or I. And we're always happy to have a chat about how you can get involved, or any issues you may be facing, or how we can help solve your issue, or if you just want some more information about how to get engaged with the broadband forum as well. Happy to help point you in those directions. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.